It's the Get Published radio show. And here's your host, Gerald Everett Jones, the guy who has the answers because, well, he's made all the mistakes himself.
Today, I want us to consider the notion that historical fiction is all about today. I'm sure my famously opinionated co-hosts Cheyenne, Cockrell, and Tom Page will have a lot to say about this.
You bet. Historical fiction has to be my favorite genre.
Well, I wrote some of my sci-fi books so long ago, I guess you could consider them historical, and me too, for that matter.
And then we have, of course, Tom, we have your throwback essays that we run as show promos. You're a history buff, Tom.
Guilty as charged.
Our featured guest is Catherine Delors, author of historical fiction, including the books Mistress of the Revolution and For the King. She blogs at Versailles and More and has an incredible following. And she's practiced immigration law, dividing her time between France and Los Angeles. I have to say I'm not objective about this because I've read her books and I'm a huge fan. Welcome to Get Published, Catherine.
Thanks for having me.
Catherine, I wanted to ask you about some of the characters that you focus on and kind of how that's mirrored in today's world. So a lot of your books tend to center on female characters struggling to survive. And how would you say that's similar or different from kind of what women go through today, their plight?
I think today in the first world, we are very lucky as women because we have access to education. We are more or less protected by the laws of our countries. We have access to a professional career. Well, that wasn't the case until recently, and that's still not the case in much of the world today. Many women do not have access to any kind of education. They are still second-class citizens, assuming they are even considered citizens in their own countries. So I think that kind of very low status for women is still happening in much of the world today.
Well, it seemed to me, Catherine, in reading your books that there was a strong flavor of, shall I call it, sexual politics. And I mean, I know that the struggles were different. You know, back then, if a woman didn't marry well, her choices were nun or prostitute. But what do you think of the notion that historical fiction is all about today?
I think it's very true. I think historical fiction is about today, and that's why people like and read historical fiction. That's why they watch historical movies. That's why they read historical nonfiction. I think people are fascinated by the past because the present is very often a repeat of the past.
Well, what is it about the French Revolution that so fascinates you?
Oh, it's a turning point in the history of Western thought.
Weren't you born on the 4th of July?
Yes.
Did I hit a nerve there?
Yes, I'm a firecracker. that doesn't
I suspect that's true,
lot
too.
Of weight in France. In France, I would have had to be born 10 days later.
That's funny. That's actually my birthday, July 14th, French Independence Day.
Oh my. We have a sisterhood going here. Tom has a question.
Catherine, Mistress of the Revolution, has a rags to riches and back to rags plot, which you share with many writers like Balzac. I'm wondering just exactly how those stories resonate today with you.
Well, I think it's a very, very universal storyline, and that's a reflection of a life story of real people. People who are born into rags want to rise to riches, and that's a normal human endeavor. And I see that in many historical figures, and I'm particularly fascinated by those historical figures.
Well, and of course today we've got a fascination with
it's
the
a
1%.
universal storyline.
an excellent plot engine, but I think also among your fans, the idea of opening Vanity Fair magazine and seeing how the other 1% live, there's a fascination there, certainly.
Your book for the King is about the time of Napoleon. Is Napoleon a character who fascinates you or resonates with you?
Fascinates me, yes.
Yeah.
It's difficult not to be fascinated by him. He was an extraordinary man, not from my standpoint, not from a military angle, but he was a political genius.
Well, didn't he step into a power vacuum?
He managed to turn really dismal defeats into huge PR victories. And to me, that's a mark of a political genius.
That sounds like it resonates with today.
That's a real stunt.
No, but when he came to power, didn't he step into the revolution hadn't, I don't know whether I'd say fizzled, but it didn't really follow the same arc that it did over here in America.
They're very, very different revolutions. The American Revolution was a struggle for liberty, but also for independence from what was perceived as a foreign power. While the French Revolution was a revolution against what was perceived as a system that couldn't evolve, that couldn't reform itself, that was totally sclerotic. And then any attempts at reform, which had been done by the king himself before the revolution.
Really?
All these attempts, he was, Louis XVI was a fairly brilliant man. He was not a brilliant politician, unlike Napoleon, but he was a very intelligent man, and he realized that reform was indispensable. But he didn't have the political skill to implement it. He tried and he failed. And a couple of years later, he had the French Revolution. And at the beginning of the revolution, he was still extremely popular, and people considered him the head of the revolution.
Well, you're certainly an expert.
He couldn't handle it, and things turned violent, and things evolved in a way where all of the old order was overthrown.
Get Published Radio will be right back after this message.
Get Published is all about helping you. You get published. And these days, the way to go is self-publishing, where there are no agents or editors or big publishing houses telling you can't, or making you feel like you're not good enough. Going back in history, many famous authors were self-publishers. With his own printing press, Benjamin Franklin published Poor Richard's Almanac in 1732, long before he was a famous statesman. That's how we know Ben's sayings, such as, "Fish and visitors smell in 3 days." Seriously, if you want to change your life or change the world or both, it's a great time to get in the game. Ebooks are particularly easy. With a click, you can reach a worldwide audience. Did you know that there are more people in China who read English than those of us who use the language in all the rest of the world? So if you've got a story to tell, write that memoir or that novel that's been percolating in your head. And if you're an established professional, or if you have a job you dislike or no job at all, give us that business or technical or even political book that establishes you as an expert who deserves serious attention. Yes, it's easy to get published, but understand you'll need help if you want professional results. Editors and copy editors help you clean up your prose. Book designers make the product eye-catching. And publicists help you be heard above all that social media noise. We have those support resources on our website, getpublishedradio.com. And there we've also got a request for services form, where you can get personal attention for whatever might be keeping you from getting it done. That's why we say getpublishedradio.com is your doorway to unlimited self-expression. Hey, it's all about the First Amendment. Use it or lose it.
Welcome back as Gerald and his co-hosts speak with historical novelist Catherine Delors.
I know that you actually, after you finished the manuscript, or at some point when you were developing Mistress of the Revolution, you decided to query agents, but you wanted to go with mainstream publishing, and you succeeded. Can you tell us about that process? Did you consider self-publishing, or did you just knock the ball out of the park the first time and the rest is history.
I know I wanted to get published, and I would have gotten published some way or other, but I was very lucky. I started sending queries. Very quickly, I had 2 agents who were interested in representing me. And I would have been really over the moon with one agent. I had 2. The difficult part was to pick the agent who was going to represent me. And I was very, very lucky. And then my agent was lucky representing me as well, because she got competing offers from publishers very quickly. So it's just dumb luck.
Well, the quality of your writing, of course, is going to be paramount, but I would think also topic and your historical
Absolutely.
romance genre is very, very, very popular with especially women.
It's forever
you.
popular.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with a novel called Forever Amber, going back for many years? That thing still keeps coming back into print, and it's not as good as yours, but...
There we go.
Well, the plot is... no, really, it isn't, but...
Well, we need to see feature films for Mistress of the Revolution and for the King.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, some really old, fairly old historical novels are still in print, and they are still being reprinted.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think the genre has really an enduring appeal.
Well, I think it does reinforce the topic of our show today is historical fiction is all about today. And I think it does reinforce the idea that particularly women readers, although, I felt a pull, into your subject matter and your stories, but I think there is, like we say, a resonance. I think that there is an identification with, again, you have this female character, she's starting low and she aspires to rise high, and then she rises high and she's got to get involved in all this court intrigue, and she has to play favorites and she has to manipulate and she has to use all of her wiles, and then, despite all of this, and along comes a revolution and rocks her boat, and it's an incredible ride, an emotional, roller coaster.
I think it described the plight of women in those days was worse than it is today, and sometimes today it's pretty bad. But you're struggling in a class society.
I mean, one of the biggest parallels I see is with this book and kind of what's happening today. Yes, women have been working for so many years to get what we have now in our first world countries, which is, as Catherine said, much better than back in those days. But now women have this kind of overwhelming feeling that we're backsliding, that Congress is passing things that are affecting things that we changed years and years ago, that we fought for
trying
years
to put
ago.
them back where they used to be.
Exactly. They're trying to
overturning settled law.
They're trying to put women back in their corner, where they go, where they think they go.
Back
so
to
that
1950.
Yeah.
1890, I would say.
Yeah, that's more appropriate for them. They like that better.
Well, it was
before Teddy Roosevelt, started.
Oh,
both of the Roosevelts ruined everything.
Well, it was harder in the French Revolution, even in comparison. So this is quite an impressive achievement, this novel.
Well, I
have to hand it to her.
Catherine's written about Napoleon, and talked about him as a politician, but as a lawmaker, Catherine, was that not world-changing Napoleonic Code?
Yes, and the striking thing about the Napoleonic Code is that people consider it a major achievement, while actually it was a totally reactionary text. It took women's rights way back. Sometimes the situation of women, the legal status of women under the Napoleonic Code was worse than before the revolution.
Notable that you write in English.
Yes.
Masterfully.
It turned out I hesitated a lot in the beginning between writing in French and writing in English. I don't know why, but I decided to write in English, and it turned out that was a very, very clever decision, although I didn't know it at the time, because French publishers don't want to publish my novels.
Really? Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I wish I knew.
You're politically incorrect, is that?
Maybe I'm politically incorrect. And I've talked to to French agents or agents used to working in France. And those agents told me that French publishers see me as purely American, which obviously I'm not. I'm American, but not purely American. They don't like it, and I don't know, maybe I'm a traitor or something.
Oh, Lord. Well, now, you've got that blog, Versailles and More, and I think you're one of the more successful people at social media. You've got an incredible following, and it's impressive how long the discussion threads are on your posts. Do you have any insights or secrets or tips for authors who want to really engage people?
I think that's pretty easy. You have to work a lot at it.
News to me.
You have to spend a whole lot of time at
Okay.
it. That's easy in a way, and it's difficult too, because when you spend so much time on social media, you curtail your writing time. So it's very difficult to find a good balance between your presence on social media and the need to find time to write, especially as you mentioned, I'm an attorney too, so I need to find time to practice law as well.
You're fighting the good fight, I understand.
There's no secret really, but there's a secret is how to balance all of these things.
Well, Catherine, it's been a delight having you, and as you have probably heard, Get Published Radio is all about the First Amendment, and you've helped us reinforce that concept. So thank you for being with us. And your books, again, are Mistress of the Revolution and For the King. Read them.
Thank you so very much.
Get Published Radio will be right back after this message.
You know, in all the history of the world, with today's technology, it's never been easier to get published, to self-publish your printed book, ebook, audiobook, even multimedia ebook. And not just novels and memoirs, or how-to books and histories, although if that's what you've got, let's have it. But also poetry, spoken word, graphic novel, cartoons, children's picture book, interactive video, games, virtual reality, and imaginative mashups of all this stuff. Get into the game. Along the way, you'll no doubt need some professional help from an editor, a book designer, a publicist. But isn't the investment in yourself worth it? How about you take the money you'd spend on your next vacation and get famous instead? GetPublishedRadio.com. That's our support website where we've got links to all the resources you'll need. And don't forget that request for services form if you crave some personal attention. That's GetPublishedRadio.com. Hey, it's all about the First Amendment. You can use it or lose it.
You know, Runke Productions, the audio magicians, can take your radio shows, podcasts, audiobooks, and ads from the streets of New York to the outer reaches of the galaxy.
I think we need more echo at the end of that.
Now look, visit us at runkeeproductions.com.
I still think we need more cowbell.
Today's topic is Historical Fiction is All About Today, and I'll be using a thrilling example from a notorious Verdi opera. So, get comfortable or set the pace on that treadmill or make sure the waiter has your order because we're going to the opera. I want you to consider the notion that historical fiction is really all about today. The example I'll use is actually from an opera, Nabucco by Giuseppe Verdi. It's one of the most beautiful choruses ever composed. The Chorus of the Hebrew Slaves. The Italian song title is Va Pensiero, loosely translated, Let Us Reflect. It's about Jewish people 3,000 years ago enslaved in Babylon. Quite simply and movingly, they're singing about how much they miss home and how they'll probably never get back. Nabucco has traditionally been an enormously popular opera. One remarkable performance was in March of 2011 at the Opera House in Rome. Typically, this chorus gets a standing ovation. The show stops while the audience claps and cheers. On this night, Maestro Riccardo Muti stopped the show and addressed the audience, and he gave them a stern lecture. Muti drew an analogy between the chorus of the Hebrew slaves and the fact that the Italian government had just cut the budget for the National Opera. And he was saying, if you don't fund the opera, we will be missing our culture just the same way the Jews were longing for their homeland. This is our national identity. This is our story. This is who and what we are. He quoted a line in the chorus, O mia patria si bella e perduta. O my country so beautiful and so lost. He was scolding the audience, many of them rich donors, but particularly the government of President Silvio Berlusconi. Then Muti instructed the audience that the chorus would be sung again. They all had the lyrics printed in their programs, and he invited them to sing along. The audience was back on their feet, and they joined the company in singing the encore. There were tears in some eyes, and it concluded as people tossed their programs into the air in what looked like a shower of confetti. Now this score was not only inspiring, it was a deep throwback to the history not only of the Hebrew slaves, but also of this opera itself, and the more recent history of Italy. In the first year this opera was performed in 1842, the audience also demanded an encore. But at that time, Italy was ruled by the Austrians, and encores in the opera house were strictly forbidden. But this time, Verdi got one. So ever since, in the mind of the Italians, this chorus has become an anthem of defiance. When Verdi composed this, Italy was going through a period that historians call the Risorgimento, the resurgence. It was the reunification of Italy, which was a collection of fragmented regions with a weak central government, which left a power vacuum such that the Austrians ended up dictating to them. Of course, Italy wanted to be its own country, break away, and assert its national identity. This chorus became the rallying cry for the 5 Days of Milan in 1848, in effect saying, let's be Italy. We want our soul. We want our country back. So, in Verdi's day, were there tears for 3,000-year-old slaves? No. They identified with the powerful emotions for their immediate personal reasons. Presumably, this is why Verdi picked the material. Or perhaps his subconscious just found a way to invest his everyday concerns in the work. Now, in our time, it happens again. Muti picks this opera for the night when he decides to chastise the government for gutting the arts. And during this encore, with the audience joining in, even the performers are starting to cry. Is Muti trying to send a message about 3,000-year-old people? No. Is he trying to defy the Austrians? That fight is over. He cares about funding for the opera and how much that means to the Italian national spirit today. Now, when the audience is singing and crying, are there tears for the opera? Well, perhaps the singers in the chorus. No, the audience is crying from feelings of deep patriotism for Italy. This performance was during the 150th anniversary of the Risorgimento. This song was the unofficial national anthem, and since then, Italy has been devastated by 2 world wars. After World War II, people were impoverished, and it was essentially a broken country. And today, they're still crazy and with challenges, but relatively prosperous. To be an Italian is to resonate with Verdi. So, no matter what you pick, whether it's Moby Dick or the historical novel you're going to write this year, remember, it is all about today. Feel that sense of responsibility. Feel that sense of curiosity and inspired awe. Ask yourself, why am I so passionate about this story? What is it about this piece of history that tugs at my heart? If you've been listening to this show, you probably already know some of the story behind why I wrote Bonfire of the Vanderbilts, about a 100-year-old painting I saw in the museum. Well, I'll give you a clue. It's about the 1% of yesteryear. It's about arrogance and power and love and betrayal. It's about how the mighty can fall. Here, listen to the slaves as they sing. They are choosing not just to complain and give up, but to make their song loud and defiant. Either like Solomon to the fates, you present a sound of crude lament, or the Lord inspires in you a song which takes courage into the depths. And that's our show. Get Published is all about self-publishing and self-expression. And that getting published and the ease of getting published these days is really all about exercising the First Amendment in this free society of ours. What we need these days are more ideas, Even though we're deluged with information, we need more good ideas. And we need debate about those ideas. Book-length debate, not just snippets that are posted on social media, not just selfies and cute pictures of your pets, the things that you really think. And remember, because in self-publishing there are no gatekeepers out there, that is the good news and that is the bad news. So hire some good help. Perhaps you found that here. You may find it on the website, whatever you're looking for, whether it's an editor or a book designer or somebody to help you promote. But hire good help, get good advice, and by all means, please get published.
The Get Published radio show with Gerald Everett Jones is produced by Runkey Productions. Our producer is Lori Marple, and your announcer is Bill Navarro. Music by Jason Shaw. You'll find links to support services on our website, getpublishеdradio.com. So whether you're an author, a publisher, or a self-promoter, get help at getpublishedradio.com. And thanks for listening.